I was looking at my CV this morning, don't even ask why, just some boring admin, and it just hit me how completely fictional it is.
Fictional. How
I
so?
mean, it lists the jobs, the dates, the degrees. It's supposed to be the story of my life, right?
Right. The official story.
But none of the moments that actually changed me are on there.
Hmm.
The time I got fired. Not there, but that changed me more than the job ever did. The quiet Tuesday, I realized I was in completely the wrong relationship, not on the CV.
It's the difference between the resume and the eulogy, isn't it? Or maybe even deeper. The difference between what happened to you and what you metabolized from it.
Metabolized. That is a perfect word for it. And that is exactly where we're going today. We are looking at a stack of research on a concept called sacred landmarks.
Or sometimes spiritually defining memories.
And I want to be clear right up front, we are not talking about nostalgia. We are not talking about those core memories from that animated movie. We're talking about the actual architectural beams that are holding up your worldview right now.
Right. The source material draws a really hard line here. It argues that most of us are walking around with a timeline of events that we think defined us, but we're ignoring the real structural shifts.
We treat them like anecdotes.
Exactly. But the research suggests they're actually functioning as an internal reference point system. They're the navigation data we use, usually unconsciously, to make every single decision in the present.
Okay, that concept, internal reference point, that's where I want to start. It sounds a little technical for something that's meant to be, spiritual.
Well, think of it like precedent in law. When you face a new situation, a conflict at work, a moral choice, your brain doesn't just compute it from scratch.
It looks for a cheat sheet.
It scans your database for a precedent. And a sacred landmark is a memory that was so impactful, so chemically encoded with emotion or insight, that it becomes like the Supreme Court ruling for your life.
So if you have a landmark memory where trusting a group led to betrayal.
Your internal reference point is going to flash a huge danger sign every time you join a new team. It's not just a memory anymore. It's a filter.
So if we don't know what our landmarks are, we're essentially running on autopilot using old software.
Worse, we're using maps for territories we aren't even in anymore. And that's why the source defines these as spiritual landmarks.
Mm.
Not because they involve, angels or incense,
Uh-huh.
but because they determine your values, your sense of meaning, and how you relate to the very idea of truth.
I'm so glad you brought up the incense thing because when I saw the topic, my mind immediately went to a mountaintop. Maybe some chanting, definitely a sunset.
The Instagram spirituality aesthetic.
Totally. But the reading took a sledgehammer to that idea pretty fast.
It has to. The good vibes myth is it's everywhere. We tend to think spiritual has to mean pleasant. A defining moment must be bliss or peace or feeling high on life.
But the data says otherwise.
The data suggests that if you only look for the shiny, happy moments, you are missing about half the architecture of your soul. A huge percentage of these landmarks come from what the source calls the great stripping away.
Okay, what does that mean?
We're talking about grief, trauma, burnout, humiliation, profound loneliness.
Which is so counterintuitive. We usually file those things under damage, not growth. We go to therapy to fix those moments, not to, put them on a pedestal.
But think about the function. What happens in a moment of deep crisis?
Everything falls apart.
Exactly. The illusions fall away. The social niceties stop mattering. You stop caring about your 5-year plan or what your neighbors think. You are forced into a raw confrontation with reality.
And that's spiritual.
The source argues that this closeness to the raw truth, even if that truth is incredibly painful, is the definition of a spiritual experience. It reshapes you because it burns off everything that wasn't real to begin with.
So a sacred landmark is defined by its impact, not its feeling, not its valence. It doesn't matter if it was good or bad.
Precisely. It only matters if it shifted your trajectory. Did it change the way you see the world? If yes, it's a landmark.
Okay, so let's get into the categories. The source material breaks these down into 5 common types, which I found really helpful because my memory is just a blur. These buckets helped organize it.
And they cover a whole spectrum. The first one is the most familiar to people, which is probably why it's listed first. Moments of deep connection.
This is the one that fits the postcard. Standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon or holding a newborn baby for the first time.
It fits the postcard, yeah. But we need to look at the mechanics, what's actually happening there. It's not just, wow, pretty view. It's a momentary dissolution of the ego.
The barrier between me and the rest of the world gets thin.
Yes. The astronauts call it the overview effect, seeing the Earth from space and realizing it's all one single thing.
I've had that feeling. Weirdly enough, at a concert, just this sense of being one drop in a massive ocean of energy.
That's a classic example. And the key marker of this landmark is the thought, I am not alone, or I am part of something bigger. Once you truly feel that, you can't really unfeel it.
So that's the expansion type. But then we slam right into the wall with type 2 and type 3, which feel very related. We have crisis and transformation, and then loss, death, and grief.
They are the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
They're related, but they're distinct. Crisis and transformation, what the source calls the rock bottom, is specifically about the collapse of your self-concept.
Your identity.
Yes. The job you identified with is gone, or the reputation you built is ruined, or you have to face an addiction. It's the moment you realize, I cannot continue living as the person I have been. It's an identity death.
And the spiritual part isn't the disaster itself?
No, it's the realization of what survives the disaster. There's a specific kind of resilience that is only born in the basement of life. When you realize, I lost everything I thought I needed and I am still breathing, that creates a self-trust that is, well, it's bulletproof.
Which leads right into loss, death, and grief. This is less about your identity and more about mortality.
It's the confrontation with the finite. In our world, we spend so much energy pretending death isn't real. We hide it away. But when you lose someone close or face a health scare, that veil gets ripped away. You see the clock.
I remember the source said these are the moments where our values get completely re-ranked. Not gradually, but instantly.
It is instant. You might care deeply about office politics on a Monday. Someone dies on Tuesday. By Wednesday, the idea of caring about office politics seems literally insane. That re-ranking is a spiritual shift. It moves you from the superficial to the existential.
Okay, so those are the loud ones, the earthquakes. But the one I found most interesting, maybe because I'm a bit allergic to drama, is type 4. Moments of clarity or awakening. The text calls these the quiet landmarks.
And these are dangerous because they're so easy to miss. There are no fireworks, no crying. It's often just silence.
Like when you're driving home, you stop at a red light, and a sentence just forms in your head with total clarity.
Yes. I don't love him anymore. Or, I need to write that book.
The source describes this as truth landing in the body. It's not emotional. It feels more like physics, like a heavy weight just settling on the floor.
That's a perfect description. It's the absence of conflict. Before that moment, you might have been agonizing, weighing pros and cons. Then the landmark hits and the debate just stops, you know. And even if you don't act on it for another 5 years, the shift happened in that second.
And then type 5, reclaiming power. I have to admit, I raised an eyebrow at this one. It sounds a lot like therapy speak. Setting boundaries, speaking your truth. Isn't that really spiritual?
I get the skepticism. We usually think of boundaries as defensive walls, but the source frames them as acts of consecration.
Consecrate.
To set a boundary is to define what is sacred space and what is not. If you grew up in a situation where you had no agency, where you were a resource for other people, the act of saying no is a theological statement.
That's a bold claim, a theological statement.
It's a statement that says, I exist, I have stewardship over this soul, I am not an infinite resource for your consumption. For someone who has been silenced for decades to finally speak up, even if their voice shakes, that is a massive spiritual landmark. It changes the power dynamic between them and the universe.
Okay, I see that. It's about sovereignty. So we have the list: connection, crisis, loss, clarity, and reclaiming power. The listener's probably nodding along, maybe a few things are clicking, but how do we actually go about the detective work? The source says it isn't always easy.
No, our brains bury things. The source gives 4 methods, and they work best when you layer them. The first is emotional imprints, getting out of your head and into your body.
The idea that the body keeps the score.
Right. The brain edits memories to protect us. The body just holds the charge. So you scan your timeline. When you think of a certain year, does your stomach tighten? Is there a conversation that, when you recall it, makes your heart race?
Even if it was 20 years ago.
Especially if it was 20 years ago. If the energy is still live, it's a landmark. It's still broadcasting a signal that affects your behavior today.
Method 2 is pattern changes. This is the before and after.
Right. Look at your life in chapters. Was there a time you're incredibly risk-averse, and then suddenly you weren't? Don't just look at the change. Look at the pivot point. What happened in the 6 months before that shift? Trace the effect back to its source.
Method 3 is internal phrasing, listening to the narrator in your head.
We all have one, and it loves absolute statements. I will never let anyone get that close again. Or, money is the only thing that keeps you safe. When you hear yourself say a rule of life, you have to stop. Ask yourself, When did I write this rule?
Oh, that's good. When did I write this rule?
Because we weren't born with them.
No. We wrote them in response to something intense. Find the moment you drafted the legislation and you found the landmark.
And finally, method 4, resistance. This one feels like the do not enter sign on a door, and it is the most important one. We often think, oh, I don't remember much from 2015, must have been a boring year. The source says the opposite. If you have a blank spot in your memory, or a time you feel a strong urge to just skip over when telling your story.
There's something there. We don't build walls around nothing.
Exactly. We build walls around things that are radioactive. But that radiation is still leaking out. The things we refuse to look at are often the ones pulling the strings most violently.
Which brings us to the so what question. Why go digging? If I've successfully locked 2015 in the basement, why on earth should I go down there? It sounds painful.
You can try to ignore it. But the source argues that this leads to spiritual bypassing. It's like building a skyscraper on a foundation you refuse to inspect. You can build it high, but the first time the wind blows, the whole thing wobbles.
Spiritual bypassing. Using love and light to ignore your problems.
Right. Using spiritual ideas to avoid emotional reality. By identifying your landmarks, especially the messy ones, you integrate them. You're saying, this happened, this is part of my structure. It creates a sturdiness. You stop fighting your own history.
But, and this is a huge but, we have to talk about safety because we're basically telling people to go poke at their trauma. The source material has a giant warning label here.
It does, and we have to honor that. This is not a challenge to see how much pain you can endure. The text mentions the window of tolerance. If you start exploring a memory and you feel yourself dissociating, checking out, feeling numb, or if you feel overwhelmed by panic, you stop.
Immediately.
Immediately. Re-traumatizing yourself is not spiritual growth, it's just injury. If you find a landmark that feels like a live wire, don't touch it with your bare hands. This is where you bring in a professional, a therapist, a counselor. They are partners in this, not enemies.
And for the milder stuff.
Journaling, what the source calls grimoire work. Writing gets the memory out of the loop in your head and onto paper where it stays put. Ritual can help too. Lighting a candle for a past version of yourself. It contains the energy so it doesn't flood everything.
I like that idea of containment. It's about respecting the memory enough to name it, but respecting yourself enough not to drown in it.
That's the balance.
So we've defined sacred landmarks as these internal navigation points. We've looked at the 5 types from connection and clarity to crisis and loss. And we've talked about how to find them.
And we've established that this isn't just an exercise in history. It's an exercise in authenticity.
Which leads me to the thought I want to leave everyone with. It's been nagging at me. We spend so much time curating our identity, the bio on social media, the story we tell on a first date. It's usually a story of victory.
A linear story.
Exactly, linear. But if we strip that away, if we look at the actual landmarks, the moments that broke us and the moments we stayed silent, the moments we walked away, that creates a very different map, a map of a stranger sometimes.
A stranger, yeah.
So here is the provocation. If you are only identifying with the polished version of your timeline and ignoring the structural beams because they're ugly or painful, do you actually know who you are? Or are you just playing a character based on a script you wrote to keep yourself safe?
And if you're playing a character, then who is living your life?
Something to chew on. Go find your landmarks, but please do it gently.
Safety first. Stay curious.
We'll see you in the next deep